Right, welcome everyone. We are going to call to order the Digital Access Committee meeting at 2:41 p.m. on August 9th. I apologize for delay. We couldn't connect to the internet, so I'm glad we're discussing how to get everyone connected to the internet today. We have two members here, Commissioner Ward and myself. Commissioner Ariola will not be able to join us today. I guess we have an adoption of the agenda. All right, I'll pass the gavel over to Commissioner Ward and I will second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, here's the gavel back.
All right, thank you very much. We have a motion to adopt the minutes. All right, we have an adoption of the minutes as the next agenda item.
I move we adopt the minutes.
All right, I'll throw the gavel over to you. I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye. All
It's,
right.
unanimous with Ariel absent. Here's the gavel back.
All right, thank you very much. So we will move on to discussion on the broadband initiative. City Manager Feldman, you want to take us away?
Thank you, Commissioner. So as you are aware, several months ago, we engaged the service of Magellan Advisors to prepare our broadband feasibility analysis. We have given you, as part of your package, the Task 1 broadband business plan, which is the evaluation of the broadband areas of need in the city. And we have a presentation today by Magellan. Courtney Violet is with us and his team. And I think they're up there somewhere.
We are. Good afternoon.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to you, Court.
Sounds good. Thank you. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Just give me 1 second. And can everybody see that?
We can, yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the introduction, Mr. Feldman. My name is Courtney Violet. I am the Chief Operating Officer here at Magellan Advisors. As Mr. Feldman said, we have been working now for a few months with the city on this broadband business plan project, and we're excited to share some just initial information, interim deliverables, and some findings, and to really talk about where we're headed next. So I wanted to spend a few minutes today talking about, the vision for broadband in the city of Gainesville. Obviously, you guys have been at this for a number of years, having had another study commissioned and completed in 2019. So we want to talk about that a little bit. We're also excited to have a couple of commissioners here because we'd like to hear from you as well. So while we're here to explain to you what we've been doing and what we hear and what we're seeing so far, we also want to hear from you since this is the first time getting a chance to interact. We want to talk a little bit about our scope of work and why we're here, what we're going to be delivering over the next few months, and then to also dig in a little bit into the key points of the first interim deliverable. Those key points included stakeholder input from all the meetings that we've been hosting. We want to talk a little bit about our findings around digital inclusion in Gainesville. We want to talk about the 2019 broadband study and some of the findings and just really talk about an update, right? It's been several years and there's been a lot of big things that have happened, primarily last year, 2020 COVID lockdowns, right? That put stress on a lot of our broadband services across the nation. So we want to talk about how perhaps that community broadband study was a little bit before its time, right? And things have changed. We also want to talk about the providers in Gainesville and also around some preliminary broadband areas of need that we've identified and that we've asked Mr. Feldman and his team to validate for us. And then we'll talk about the next steps. So, as we understand it, the city's goal here or potential goal through this project is to ensure high-speed fiber internet services are available for everyone who's in the city of Gainesville. That includes all residents, businesses, and that it's available at an affordable rate. And that you're able to address the digital divide within the city. Through this project, there are numerous goals and also expected outcomes that you've identified. And while broadband supports all of these, it definitely supports a number of the goals you've outlined here around, sustainable, small, locally owned businesses. I think we also saw that working from home and home-based businesses obviously was able to take advantage of last year and were able to continue with their work. Obviously, we want to reduce the poverty level in Gainesville, ensuring that everyone has equal access to the internet and to other online services, really to level the playing field a bit. We also want to make sure that the city has the technology infrastructure that can provide fast, reliable, and affordable support for its businesses and home offices, and that you're able to generate a diverse local economy that can in some ways be insulated from economic trends. Lastly, you want to attract high businesses to Gainesville, consistent with vision and the targeted businesses, and then develop a successful minority and women-owned business enterprise program. So as I said, broadband is a key part of many of these. And I think what we'll find as we progress throughout the next several months is, our goal is to put together a plan that can directly attack and hopefully bridge a number of these gaps that exist today. We have been hired, and part of our scope was to assess the 2019 community broadband study that was completed by CCG Consulting. We're going to hit on some of the key points today. We have reviewed that study in detail, and we'll provide you some of our findings and feedback. We also want to develop a fact base around what digital assets exist to determine gaps throughout the community and how best to address them. We also wanted to will review the ability of the city to function as an ISP to both businesses and residents within the city and also throughout the GRUCOM service area, and also address the role of GRUCOM in that process. And finally, we will produce and present an investment grade business plan. We expect that we will be working probably throughout the next 3 months or so to wrap this up. And then we'll be back in front of you again this fall to present that business plan. So, as we move forward, we want to just hit on some basics, talk a little bit about just some trends and really what we're seeing out there in the market space. The city of Gainesville is not alone in trying to figure this out. We as Magellan have been in this space for 11 years. We work with over 400 cities, counties, tribes, regional planning organizations. And this is a very hot topic, as I'm sure you all know. And many of our clients, again, have been at this for a number of years. This is not, a one-year initiative where you click snap your fingers and all of a sudden broadband availability is there and available to everybody. So this can take some time. As we all know, the economy today runs on digital technology. Our society relies on it. And that is mainly because we have digital devices that we are inventing and that are being deployed throughout our communities, our homes, and places of work. And all of those things require connectivity. The internet, as you all know, is a network of networks that interconnects all of these digital devices. Some of the big terms we hear today, not just amongst those of us in the industry, but also at the local government levels, but also in the federal government levels, right? In the funding notices that we hear. We hear things about the digital divide and digital equity and inclusion. And we want to make sure we had a baseline, definition, right? That we can all agree to what these topics mean. So, the digital divide is really the gulf between those who have digital technology and those who do not, those who have a high-speed connection, and those who don't. Digital equity is making sure that everyone within your community can fully participate in the digital economy and society and have the necessary technology and the skills to do so. And then again, inclusion ensures everyone has the access, the devices, the skills, support, and the systems to participate, not just in the economy, but as we saw last year, to be able to participate in remote education, to be able to participate in government, right, through online council meetings, as you all hosted last year, and also to take advantage of things like healthcare and other online services that are really becoming in the mainstream today. As we look at what's driving the need for more and more capacity, this is a pretty basic slide, but I think it tells a whole lot. Over the last 20 years, we've seen telecommunications networks grow and evolve from, traditional copper networks like Twisted Pair that AT&T had deployed and provided DSL over for years. We have lots of wireless and satellite options that are becoming available. And fiber to the prem is really the gold standard that, many cities, many of our customers, including our electric co-ops and tribes and so forth, are looking to deploy because really it provides a future-proofed amount of capacity that you will be able to provide not only today, tomorrow, but well into the future. The speeds achieved on fiber, are really theoretical in most. They're faster than the speed of light because it is laser, right? That is transmitting the data. So lots of bandwidth. There's been tremendous amount of capacity that has been tested across fiber, and that is increasing each and every year as the components, the electronics, and everything get better and faster. So, we here at Magellan focus highly in wireless planning and also in fiber to the home planning. For this project, we are looking at fiber as the primary option. Obviously, through your ownership and partnership with GRU, you have lots of pole assets, you have lots of existing fiber that's out there today. So, our first pass is going to look at what would the build out look like to bring fiber to everybody. But we also recognize that there could be other, technologies in the future that could also augment those requirements. The analogy of comparing bandwidth to, pipes and water, if you look on the right-hand side, as you can see, a 1 gigabit service of fiber is just a far much more capacity than any other legacy service available today. And in places like Chattanooga, in places like Cedar Falls, they're deploying greater than 1 gig to homes. In Cedar Falls right now, which is in Iowa, they are doing a retrofit of 16,000 ONTs, devices that go in their homes, deploying 10 gig to every home. So some of the other trends and issues that we work with, on every project, and I would like to say, every community we work with is different. Everyone's unique. Some have assets, some don't. Some have been in the fiber business for decades, right? Some are taking this on as a new concept. But at the end of the day, there are trends and issues and drivers in every community that we look at as we really work through these projects. So, the trends we're seeing, obviously, connectivity to fiber, everything that we can connect to fiber from a security perspective or from a major facility perspective, we're planning for fiber. There are, utility assets that, work fine off wireless. There are new wireless technologies that are providing more capacity and functionality that can be deployed. But we are looking at those key assets, those key community assets and functions, and planning to connect them with fiber. Lots of community-based networks are being developed where, the city or the county or the tribe is becoming the actual provider of service, right? And that's something we're going to look at here for the city and for GRUCOM. In many cases, just like you do today, we have clients that are building open networks. They're leasing dark fiber. They're leasing conduit. That is a fully acceptable business plan if it meets your goals and needs. We're obviously seeing rapid change in technology. Lots of satellite options are coming down the pike. You've got big transitions to cloud services. So that is really just pushing more and more bandwidth requirements in our users. And then you also see as technology evolves that, costs are coming down. They're becoming more complex. There are more powerful solutions, and at the same time, our cities, especially those that have utilities attached to them, realize there's also greater risk. So we've got to take great care in how we architect and how we develop these networks and really look at all the different use cases that, your investments would be supporting. And then some of the issues, who owns, who controls the infrastructure. That's always an issue that we have to work through. Obviously, the ability to share infrastructure is much more economical. We have many cities we're working with today where they, deploy one backbone, and that backbone supports city functions, it supports traffic functions, it supports utility functions, and it supports residential and commercial services in some ways. We also have customers who are mandating, right, separation and segregation of physical fiber cables for some of the services. Again, not very economical practice, but it is something you have to look at when you evaluate risk. Also, the need for ongoing investment for fast and flexible access. This is all becoming much easier to afford, but really harder to understand and harder to use for some constituents. And, we do need to address that. And then, it just speaks to more digital skills and a broader, deeper, knowledge base amongst your constituents to take really advantage of all the, potential investments you're thinking about taking on. Finally, some of the other fiber trends, obviously COVID, lockdowns, mandatory remote school, that all drove the need for broadband over the last year, and that has not slowed down yet. All of the applications and usage trends, we've always looked at internet usage reports. All of that has been accelerated by COVID. And these are most likely long-term trends in some of the key sectors that we participate in, whether it's education, healthcare, and you're even seeing many businesses today, right, that are allowing remote work. We don't know for how long, but some have announced even indefinitely. Right now, there is a tremendous amount of money out there and available to support broadband. Last year, we saw obviously the CARES funding become available through the COVID Relief Fund in 2020. There are still cities and counties out there today spending those dollars. ARP is now available, and cities are looking at how they're going to utilize their ARP money to solve their connectivity challenges. And then, as you all know, we have an infrastructure bill that's also in process with substantial broadband funding available. So, now is the opportune time, if a city or a county is going to work to address these areas, to go ahead and use money that may be available at the moment. And then, as you all realize, connectivity needs of local governments, of your communities, have never been greater, and they will only increase. We don't expect any slowdown, especially as cities become smarter. They bring on smart city initiatives, connecting traffic signals and utilities and all those other things we talked about a few minutes ago. Lastly, our clients, local governments who have utilities and who have made prior investments in broadband, are really reaping the rewards today. They've made substantial investments in fixed assets like data centers and core networking technologies. They have existing fiber assets that are out there today that can be leveraged. And now they're able to use this incremental funding that's available, right, to also expand services. I thought we would hit on a few of those today just to provide an example. Obviously, these first two here, these are peers of yours through GRU. EPB Chattanooga has been at the broadband game now for almost 20 years. They went through early motions in around 2002 to become a provider. They spent a number of years planning, and then in 2008, they were a recipient of a very large federal grant, right, which really moved them into the broadband business. They used, I think it was roughly $75 million to launch their broadband utility. In 2019, Chattanooga announced that they obviously providing some of the fastest bandwidth in the nation, but more importantly, for the first time, broadband revenues exceeded their power revenues that year when they eclipsed over 100,000 customers. So Chattanooga's had a great run. They've had a lot of publicity. Dr. Greg Laudeman here on my team, he actually lives in Chattanooga. So he may bring up a couple topics there when he takes over here in just a minute. City of Palo Alto, very similar. They started investing in electronics and in fiber for the electric utility back in 2000. 13 years later, that fiber utility was generating over $2.1 million in revenue, and their fiber fund had amassed almost $15 million in savings at that point. As of last year in 2020, we are working with Palo Alto today in their fiber deployment. But as of last year, that fiber fund had grown to $30 million. They are in full design right now to deploy full fiber to the home to every resident and business throughout that community. And it looks like they're going to do it with very minimal debt service because of cash on hand and some other funding they've received. And then finally, we have a number of smaller cities, communities all across this country that are deploying fiber to the home projects. City of Mont Belvieu, Texas has been at it for about 5 years now. They launched in 2018. And just last year, towards the end of last year, they've reported over 70% take rate in 2 years. That is a huge number for a small community. And they attribute a lot of it last year to the growth just from COVID. Their folks in Mont Belvieu needed more bandwidth. And being the local home operator, they had the most to gain from being there, being available. And it's paid off tremendously. Greg, I'm going to let you go ahead and take the next couple slides.
Thanks, Courtney. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to work with you on this project. So as Courtney mentioned, that key part of our scope of work was to establish a base of facts around use of the network and opportunities to make more use of it, particularly in traditionally disadvantaged communities. So we took a number of different approaches to this. Probably one of the key things we did was just interviewed some folks in the community everywhere from the University of Florida and Santa Fe College, a number of individuals with the city in key positions, a number of community activists and other stakeholder representatives, really representing a total of 13 organizations across the community. We also, as Dave Brevitt's going to talk about a little bit here in just a few minutes, thoroughly reviewed the CCG study. We looked in depth at results of the neighbor survey that you conduct on a regular basis, dug into the census data. The National Telecommunications Information Administration has just recently released some new indicators of broadband need, and we dug into that. And we've also looked pretty extensively at GRU, their assets, policies, strategies, et cetera. So gathered a lot of good information about digital inclusion. I think the next thing that I want to really hit on is where we've seen needs and issues, but also where we see opportunities and resources. One of the things we clearly heard as a real need and issue is the overall need to really transform the local economy and the opportunities there so that it's both more resilient. The pandemic, of course, has really just highlighted this. We see a lot of issues with the environment and climate change, and need to be able to deal with those effectively. And just the dynamism of the national and local economy are all things you need to be prepared for. One of the key things we heard a good bit about is that the University of Florida is a top tier institution. It attracts a lot of talent to town, but a lot of that talent just then turns around and leaves. So it's a real opportunity to make the local economy more sticky, to keep more of that talent in the local economy, to grow it and help it be more resilient. And smart city is really interesting concept. And what we saw there in Gainesville is what we see in similar communities, in particular here in Chattanooga, but other communities that have infrastructure, is that you didn't really have a really highly formalized, smart city strategy, so to speak, that's nicely packaged, but you're doing lots of smart things with technology, and that's really the key to it. We did see a need to coordinate tech investment and governance a little bit more, and we can hit on that. And specifically really tying it back to those objectives that Courtney mentioned at the top of the discussion, so that really every dollar that's spent on technology is tied to $2 of return for your neighbors. One of the interesting things we heard there in Gainesville is there's a real sense that neighbors are really kind of over-engaged. That's unusual. Most communities, people feel like the city never listens to them. I think in Gainesville, what we heard is that the city is listening, but that there's a sense that the neighbors really want to see real results. And part of our challenge is we're trying to do this analysis, and we will typically go in and do some really in-depth primary data collection, specifically through a community survey. That did not seem appropriate there in Gainesville, just simply because people are surveyed so much. But where we might want to get some more information to better understand where the needs and opportunities are, we do feel that a survey could be a really powerful mechanism if it's targeted, if it's focused. Another issue we heard is that the digital divide in Gainesville, in a lot of ways, seems to follow kind of the traditional, quote, town and gown divide. That neighbors at the university and neighbors across the street who are not with the university have access to very different resources. Everybody at the university has GatorNet and can get high-speed wireless pretty much anywhere and on buses, et cetera. Folks, right down the block don't have the same type of access. And then I think the other thing that was a really interesting issue was kind of the concept of customers versus partners. And for practical purposes, it's about how you structure the value proposition as you're engaging folks. As you're talking about customers, you're saying you're getting not only a better price, but a better product. You're getting better performance. But at the end of the day, it is simply an economic question of what are you getting for what you pay. Whereas in partnership, it's more about working together to arrive at shared outcomes that everybody values. Everybody puts in a little bit and everybody gets out a lot. So part of, I think, the challenge there and the opportunity for Gainesville is to really think about how do you put those two things together where neighbors, whether it's the folks in the community, whether it's the institutions of the University of Florida, et cetera, or whether it's Alachua County and your neighboring cities, are they customers for GRU, for GRUCOM, or are they partners? And either way makes sense. It's just important to be really clear because there's different strategies involved. So the opportunities and resources we saw, we like to do a little bit more digging into the assets, but from what we saw, your asset base is very good. Not just GRUCOM and the GRU's assets, but assets for transportation. Also, the university obviously has very good assets. A number of the other anchor institutions have great assets. We saw that there's really amazing use of connectivity to enhance security in the community, to support research. And again, if you want to make Gainesville a really sticky place for high-end talent, these are really key factors. Using the technology for telehealth, remote work, and online learning, very pervasive, again, particularly in the higher education space and the more high-end services, more affluent neighborhoods. A bit of a challenge, particularly for access in the lower income areas. You have some great spaces and places in Gainesville, and a lot of that is really wired, or maybe I should say unwired, with wireless technologies at this point. But it seems that there could be some more opportunities to have integrated connectivity really deep into those places and spaces. And on top of that, ways for folks to actually connect with the community and get information and find resources, as well as just connect to the net. And that's, I think, the key point next is that, we definitely heard that there are folks in need in Gainesville, whether that's your senior neighbors or whether it's at-risk youth, homeless populations, et cetera. And thinking about the network as a platform to connect them, you're already doing some really interesting things in this area. And it's almost a matter of kind of building on that and taking it to the next level. And then last, I think the key thing as far as economic development goes is that you have so many different factors in your favor there in Gainesville, not only top tier university, but a fantastic regional hub location. So the network really could play a fantastic role in supporting innovation and tech-based startups, having them anchored in the region, particularly where it's specifically relevant to the economic situation there. And in particular, those kind of industries that need hubs, whether that's distribution, whether that's technical support and maintenance, sales related or businesses, and even high-tech organizations that need hub locations. Gainesville could just be really a prime location for it. And so that's a continued opportunity to really capitalize on your network. So I think the other things that we wanted to talk about and think about here today is really where is this going and what does it mean for the community? What is digital inclusion for Gainesville? And specifically, as you think about where the technology fits in, is it not just inclusive of people from different backgrounds and different socioeconomic status, but how is it inclusive across the municipal operation? And again, connecting them with your neighboring institutions. So for example, you're looking at a comprehensive plan update. Where does broadband, where does the network fit into the comprehensive plan? This is so typical in the communities we work with, that the comprehensive plan talks about transportation, it talks about land use, talks about economic development, and all of these factors really require and even rely on connectivity, yet connectivity, network infrastructure tends to be left out of these comprehensive plans. Housing programs is another great example. Public housing, it just really a place for folks that don't have alternatives, folks that need a start, folks that are really in tough situations. Well, connectivity can help them move up and out of those and tap into new economic opportunities and access healthcare, education, et cetera. So thinking about how the technology, the network infrastructure and connectivity, but even beyond that, programs to support folks to find better housing, to find better economic opportunities. It's another great example. And then, you're still looking at a good bit of development and redevelopment in the Gainesville area, especially around the student housing. How does the technology fit into that? We heard a good bit about, these companies that are developing the student housing come in and they have their prepackaged internet connectivity, and boom, that's what they put in. But is there an opportunity to position with them to provide a better solution and even help them integrate in with GatorNet and other systems like that? So I think those are really some of the key opportunities, big picture opportunities for inclusion. And then the last and probably the most important thing, going back to the point about your neighbors feeling maybe a little bit over-engaged, so to speak, is that it's important to have their input and to give them in a position of feeling that they're empowered to make these decisions. They are taxpayers and citizens and want to have a voice. But at the same time, you don't want to just go and ask them about what they think and what they feel without something real to back it up. So our general thought about the strategy that you want to take here is get the whole thing queued up and ready to go, and think about what the strategy is and where it's going to be deployed and how it's going to be deployed, and then go engage the neighbors, whether that's engaging them as potential customers to just say, what are you ready to buy? How is this going to help you? We saw this in in the electric industry, for example. It wasn't just, oh, here's some electricity. It was, hey, this can help you, wash clothes and light your home. It's the same thing with broadband. We have to make it relevant to people and not just assume that they know what to do with it, and get them to literally buy into it before you actually go out and deploying it, and then use that as the human capital, the social capital side, so to speak, of deploying your network. So in Smart in Gainesville, just a few things that we noticed there, and just kind of build on this a little bit. You've got some great technology initiatives, the police smartphone app and the Open GNV app. Great example of actually using the technology to connect with citizens. What we see is that a lot of this is around automating municipal functions and including utility monitoring, and that was one of the things that we saw with the CCG study. It was very focused on just kind of being more efficient and more responsive, reducing costs and avoiding problems. That's definitely very, very important, but it's really just the starting point. I think what's exciting about Gainesville is you guys are in such a strong position to really empower your neighbors and your partners with this technology to help them not only access your municipal functions and really almost literally be a part of the local government, but to really capitalize that in their community with their neighbors to make and improve the quality of place and the quality of life for everyone in Gainesville. But of course, that requires ubiquitous connectivity. You can't just say we're empowering people with technology, but have unequal connectivity across the community. You're doing some great things with public Wi-Fi. So maybe what we need to think about is this is like almost like public Wi-Fi on steroids, bigger, better, stronger, faster, right? And then the last thing that I personally just felt was really important, because your objectives that behind the study are just so cogent, so well stated and clear, that it left me thinking, how could we use GrewCom to make your minority businesses and your small businesses more viable, more resilient? How could you use it to create better economic opportunities for folks? How could you really leverage it to attract, real economic development, where you're not in a situation where it's, having to give away big tax breaks or other incentives to get industry? You've got industry coming to Gainesville and willing to basically pay a premium and really invest in the community because of what you're doing with the technology. And then the last is just this kind of concept that Courtney already hit on, is that networks, to the extent that you can share them and use that capacity for multiple purposes, basically you're getting a lot more bang for your buck, because every dollar you're investing in that network, you're doing things that get $2 or $3 back in return. And it's concept in telecom of densification, of loading more users and more applications onto the network. That could be everything from deploying a lot of small cell technology so that you have higher speed wireless, and then loading that on the network. It could be using it for what we call Internet of Things, for small devices, environmental sensors, controls, et cetera, that are all enabled over the fiber. Or, of course, it could be just launching really totally new functions for the community. I think one of the best examples to me is just the way you're taking a citizen-centered approach to planning. How do we build that into the network so that you're really using the network as a foundation for a very innovative approach to planning and to directing your investment? So those are just some thoughts about where the opportunities are, and based on what we heard from your neighbors and your other and your folks about how technology is being used and where it's available.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, and we're going to pass this over to Dave Brevitz to go ahead and take on the rest of this. I was going to introduce Dave briefly before he gets started, though. Dave has spent a lot of time in the city of Gainesville. Dave is a senior fellow at the Public Utility Research Center there at UF, and he was also a project manager on the state of Florida broadband study that was, I believe, managed out of the PURC back in 2010. So, Dave, if I missed anything, please add on, and go ahead and start these next few slides. Dave, you might be on mute.
Mute.
Can hear you now. Dave?
Yep, I think I've got it.
We can hear you.
Okay, good. Thank you, Courtney. That's true. I'm glad to be here with the city of Gainesville, and have been to Gainesville many times in connection with that work at the University of Florida that Courtney just mentioned. My responsibility was to review the previous report by CCG, and so we have a summary here of the primary findings. One of the biggest findings is that report, in fact, has been overtaken by event. It was before COVID and before the COVID response, which really showed up the digital divide in Gainesville. And the report also had a big question mark on funding for any potential expansion of broadband. The pandemic response has given some answers to that issue in the funds that are now available through the federal programs that are allowed to be spent on broadband infrastructure. A primary task was to have a look at the previous estimate for the cost to deploy to all residents in the city of Gainesville that do not reside in an apartment complex, i.e. Single family dwellings. And so we looked at that estimate very closely. We used the same data, but updated that CCG had used. Our network design was similar to CCG in that we leveraged the existing GRUCOM network and used our fiber cost construction model to estimate using address level data to serve every premise. We came up with what we think is a very, very closely comparable estimate. CCG came up with 66 million in capital cost for fiber, and we came up with 66.77 million. We do believe that there are opportunities for economies that would, all else equal, reduce those figures. The first opportunity being using aerial or overhead construction, greater emphasis on that versus buried fiber. And then second would be to use pedestals out in the neighborhoods rather than digging holes for vaults and putting the connections underground in vaults.
And Dave, if I could just add to that,
Sure.
Over the last year, there has been a tremendous strain on both the supply chain and pricing of materials, just because of all the projects. Factories were shut down a little while last year, so we've seen enormous pressure on pricing and materials. The good news is the bulk of those prices have impacted things like conduit, which you use for underground deployment, boxes and other types of assets that again are typical of underground deployment. The vast deployment method within the design that we've worked on is, again, leveraging the GRUCOM pole and aerial plant. So you're a bit more isolated in the cost increases that we've seen because, again, the method that we're using today is an aerial deployment versus underground.
I do have a question on the overhead or the significant more savings available if we did more overhead. How much of savings is there available if we did go more wherever there's a pole, we go overhead instead of going underground?
It's a tremendous amount of savings. I don't have that here in the presentation, but we can definitely dig into those details and get you an answer.
And that 66.7 or that 66 million, that is not taking that into account. I mean, there is some aerial, but it's not going as much aerial as we could to save money. Is that correct?
This estimate is using, we validated the amount of aerial plant versus underground plant and came up with a similar number compared to CCG's. GRU provided us significant GIS data, pole routes, their fiber lines, right? And so we had very good data to work from. So we're using some very similar assumptions to CCG. And while there is some underground, there is obviously a tremendous amount more of aerial deployment in the current design.
So just in that 66 million, is there more savings on top of that 66 million, or is that already taken into account the savings of aerial?
Yeah, this is aerial. But
Okay.
Again, we do believe that there are some other areas that we can still drive costs.
Okay.
Yeah, Courtney, to clarify, there is further aerial deployment that could be accomplished beyond what's included in the 66 million. So the answer to the question, as I understand it, is that yes, there are further savings available from aerial deployment versus buried.
Okay. And is that a 10% savings, 5, 20, or unknown at this time?
I do not have a number, but my understanding is that the savings would be significant.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. And then kind of the last bullet, the phase construction according to priority of need. The CCG report basically seemed to be based on deploying citywide all at once. And we think it makes sense to have a more phased construction that will alleviate it. It allows, first of all, targeting to the areas most in need, and second, makes efficient use of scarce resources, everybody's time and construction resources. Another aspect of the CCG report, the network cost was transferred into or input into a financial feasibility study. We have not done that yet. That will be the next phase of the project here, but we did have a look at CCG study in that area. And some of the key dynamics that we need to look into, and I think that you all need to think about for sure, is first of all, we do tend to agree with their assessment of the take rates. CCG estimated approximately 48% take rate based on survey data, and their methodology made sense. And the resulting take rate is very comparable to the take rates we've seen and used elsewhere. The next question, though, is which services to offer. If you think about these telecommunications offerings, it's traditionally been the triple play, where you get internet access, telephone, and cable TV. The CCG study had some extensive discussion on cable TV in or out. Our view, at least going in, is that the strong trend to everybody using streaming services like Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime suggests that if the city does go into this business, it would not make sense to include cable TV as part of that offering. Very costly, very slim margins, and the trends are going really the wrong direction, in my opinion. A third area that was important was, what do we do about the multi-dwelling units, the many that exist within the city? CCG study excluded those, and for valid reasons. An additional reason that's come up more strongly in our research is the fact that the way MDUs operate in Gainesville and elsewhere across the country is that the developers and the property owners have long-term relationships or long-term contracts with the telecommunications provider, so that the apartment complex provides the internet access and the tenant or occupant has no choice in who the provider is. So that's an issue that we're definitely trying to work through. But right now, the nature of the industry is that the developers and the property owners decide who provides the internet access in the complex, and competitors are not allowed access. Another aspect of the financial feasibility were assumptions with regard to staffing. If the city did choose to get into this line of business, how would it be staffed? The study assumed full city hiring, and we think there's a lot of outsourcing opportunities there, that this could be accomplished without hiring a bunch more city employees. So in this next phase, as we get into the financial projections and the business case, we will definitely need detailed financial data from GRU for GRUCOM to begin with the baseline financial projections. We didn't have access to that data for this phase of the project. I think a lot of that was because of what GRU is accomplishing with regard to a significant debt offering. So, but we will need that for this upcoming phase. And something else that will, of course, be crucial to include and incorporate, and we'll need your feedback on this, is pricing of the service. And the notion has come up of having a basic level of broadband speed as an amenity or as a lifeline offering. And we would need to, and we will, within the financial feasibility study, make some different assumptions on pricing and funding for that lifeline offering. And then lastly, in Florida, much is made of the limitation on municipal broadband, FS 350.81. The city is fortunate to have a Public Service Commission certificate already. And so GRUCOM is, I think, as you probably already know, grandfathered away from those provisions being applicable for the most part. There are some obligations that pertain even to a grandfathered entity like GRUCOM, but I believe that GRUCOM already observes those obligations anyway. The notion of separate books, enterprise funding, separate operating and capital budgeting. There is a question on revenue bonding if the city should choose to fund an initiative like this with revenue bonds, and that would need to be clarified by bond counsel.
I do have a couple questions on this. Just one note on in the CCG study, it showed a very high cable penetration numbers, and I just don't think that was accurate. I think it had like 90% or something close to that, and I think it's gotten. I think that was an off number in it. Just my 2 cents on that. And on the MDUs, President Biden signed an executive order, I think, recently, and I'm wondering how I think it connected to MDUs of being able to, the landlords can't restrict who gets the service. I don't know if that's true or not, or is there any thoughts on that?
Yes, you're right. That is a piece of the executive order, and we cited it in the report. The executive order asks the FCC to look into what it can do about that restriction. There's a long history over 20 years where the FCC has had a real strong interest in trying to get rid of that restriction, and for one reason or another, they've kind of not been successful. The FCC had an order out in 2008 that they thought took care of it, but the landlords and property owners got around it up to the present time. So it remains to be seen what the FCC can do in that area. I personally am not holding my breath. Things at the FCC don't happen quickly. But we're also having a look at what other cities have done on their own. We're attempting to find the best examples of that so that the city could consider action in that area for, say, new development, if it so chooses. That obliges the property owners and managers to provide for choice by the tenant of broadband provider.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Do you want to say something?
I was just going to say what David just said.
Okay.
Okay. And lastly, here's a little bit more on Smart City. It pretty much echoes what Greg had already gone through. So, Court, I think back to you.
Thank you. So I think the last item we wanted to discuss and hopefully make collaborative is really just the areas of need. As Greg had mentioned, we've pulled lots of different data sources over the last several months. We've looked at some of the updated census data. We've pulled FCC data and speed test data. We've looked at numerous layers that the city GIS and GRUCOM have provided. We do realize that census data in college towns can be a bit skewed. So we're trying to look through that and see what we can come out with as far as student rates. And we need the city to provide us some feedback on the tentative areas for broadband need that I'm going to show here in just a second. Once we identify these prioritized areas of need, then we are going to go and redo our conceptual design. We've started a conceptual design so that we could benchmark CCG's estimates, but CCG didn't necessarily take into account, again, priority areas of the city. So we've identified 5 different phases, and we're really looking for your feedback. Once we have these identified, again, final estimation of costs for each of those phases will then support the business plan and financial modeling that we're going to undertake.
Hey, Court, can I
Yep.
jump in for a quick second? Can you go
Please.
back?
Of course.
Just to emphasize one additional point, we talk here about how the census data is a little bit skewed. Unfortunately, the FCC mapping data is also skewed just by the nature of how it's gathered and how it's structured. So when you see an FCC map showing representing what is the broadband speed in that area, it's probably overestimated because the nature of the data collected is that it's self-reported by the carriers, and the criteria is, could internet service at that speed be provided without undue effort or cost? And so that's a pretty expansive definition. And the second thing is it's reported on a census block basis. And so if a carrier says we provide 100 megabits down at one premise in that census block, the whole census block is colored as having that speed available. So those two things tend to influence the reported speeds up beyond what is really there. And that's why you hear, I think, the disconnect in the community from people that say, well, we're not getting anything like those speeds, and they may not be. So
Yep.
Thanks,
Dave.
Court.
Yeah, and that's been an issue for years now. The FCC has recognized that over the last year or two, and they are supposedly funding new mapping initiatives to update those maps.
Right.
So we created our own methodology within our design team. And again, we took multiple layers to try to identify the priority areas. So on the left side, you'll see 5 priority areas, kind of a greenish blue there in the center area, followed by orange, followed by yellow, green, and gray. In the legend on the right-hand side, we've identified those as 5 priority areas, and we've also identified the number of single-family home units that are in each of those areas. And then you also have your public housing facilities identified with the green circle. So Lee, I would, I know we talked about this last week, but we would like some dialogue as to, these areas of need. We would love to get someone at the city to help us, redraw these lines or these boundaries with a red pen and let us go back to the board. So with that, are there any questions, thoughts, or ideas on anything we've shared thus far, or more specifically on the areas of need identified?
I have a few different things. I think on pricing and looking at that, I do think, I don't know if it's having 2 different ones. It's if it's a revenue maximizer, and then also one looking at trying to be able to get trying to get it affordable for the most people too. Those are kind of 2 different directions, and maybe have different numbers. I don't think we go down the revenue maximizer, but it may be good for us to know what the potential is. And if we ever did need a revenue stream, that could be our revenue stream coming in too. I do think as well as looking at where this, where it might live, if we did go out and build out residential service, either where GrewCom is currently under GRU or under general government. It's kind of the mission of it is changing somewhat, of not just being a revenue kind of utility, of really just being augmentation of the city to provide better service. Maybe general government's a better place for it. I think those are two different things. And then for the maps, I do have some thoughts on the maps. I think going the prioritization is a good way to do it. I think that makes it in more sizable chunks. I do think two areas that we should look at adding to priority area 1 are the Duval neighborhood and the Lincoln neighborhood. Those are really the only kind of dense areas of the eastern portion of our city, but I think that's mainly aerial, and I think that's the good thing about what you have in priority area 1 is those are mainly aerial areas too. And I do think maybe we could use CRA funding for a portion of the Duval and Lincoln too. I do like that you're hitting a lot of the public housing areas. And leaving off Duck Pond is probably a good idea because there is AT&T fiber there already. So it's not, I think, as immediate. I think we would see a very high take rate there. People would rather buy from the government, but it already does have fiber in that area. I don't know if Ms. Feldman or staff or Commissioner Ward have any thoughts. And we'll open up to the public too for discussion.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a lot of thoughts as we go through this. I had a chance to glance over the document before the meeting. One of the things that we have talked about for years, the phrase we've used for 3.5 years now is affordable, robust, and universal. However we achieve that, that's where I want to be. Affordable, robust, and universal. If you live in the city of Gainesville, I want our plan to be that you will have an affordable way to get good broadband, not kind of okay broadband, not just, maybe the email works, maybe it doesn't, maybe you can do your homework on it, maybe you can't, but robust. I mean, something you can count on, something you can do, that a kid can do homework on or watch a movie on, or that somebody can do serious upload and download work from home work as well. And then again, it's available throughout the city. If you live in the city, you should expect this. I really don't care how we provide it, how we assure it, but those three things are what I want to happen.
I like that. I definitely think it helps to set the vision.
Right. I mean, that's what we've been talking about for 3.5 years, I guess, maybe 4. And that's where I want us to be. I tend to think that happens best if we think about this as a service that we provide to our neighbors here in Gainesville. Instead of thinking, how can we best make a profit on it? How can we best provide the service is the question we should be asking. Now, the service isn't free to the city of Gainesville. Somebody's got to pay for this. We have hundreds of miles of fiber, but no way to really right now connect that to homes to make that useful for our neighbors.
Yep.
I don't know what the best path forward is on that, but I don't think the best path forward is for us to treat it like a revenue opportunity. I think at best it pays for itself, and if it's doing a lot more than paying for itself, then we probably ought to lower the price. Because we are not a business. The idea is to provide this service at the most affordable, robust, and universal package that we can. And maybe the best way to do that is to contract with somebody else, but I tend to think that with the infrastructure we have, there's a way to leverage that into good service for the people who live here. So that's where I start with all of it. As far as yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say we do hear you loud and clear as we start the actual financial modeling here in the coming weeks. We will be developing several iterations, looking at break-even scenarios, looking at an amenity scenario where perhaps a baseline level of service is provided, right? And if you want a gig, you pay for a gig. So we'll run through multiple iterations and multiple concepts, and we'll report back in a few months as to what we think is feasible.
Okay, I love that you talked about this earlier, but the phrase that is useful for the way you described this was sell the benefits, not the features. We could talk about how cool the internet is and all the great things that a gig to people's homes would do, but that means nothing to people who don't make that connection. You have to, it's your kid's ability to get their homework done in the way that the school expects it to be done. It's your ability to work from home seamlessly, just as well as you would at the office. It's those things that make this useful. When we talk about fiber to the home, there are like 300 people in the city who have any idea what that means. We've got to use phrases that make this useful to people who live here and sell the benefits, not the features. So I think you all get that. It sounds like you do from your presentation. I think it's important that we have a plan that rolls this out to the people who need the help the most first, but that does not forget about everybody else. I had a conversation with one of the deans at UF recently, where he expressed his concern that what he wants from the city of Gainesville are things that make it easier for him to sell working at the University of Florida. So when he makes an offer to somebody, he can say, and these are the community amenities that come with that, without the university having to shoulder the whole burden. This is something that I think is a community amenity that makes this a very attractive place. That when somebody compares an offer to come work at the University of Florida to 3 or 4 other places around the country, we can reasonably say, this is something that everybody doesn't do yet, and maybe never will. And that's an attractive thing when the Chamber of Commerce makes a presentation to a business to want to come here. If we can say, we've already run it to wherever your business is going to be, we've already run it to every home you might consider in the city of Gainesville, that's a differentiator. That's a thing that makes people more likely to want to locate their business here or their home or whatever. I think you all get that, but I think it's important to say those things. Those are the kinds of things that I'm looking for as you bring this back to us. That's all I have now, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so one of the things too, I'm looking at, and I've discussed it with the team, is ideally, I think if we can figure out how to provide 50 MIP service to every single home, okay, as a service, right, basic service that you get for residing here, and then allow you to build onto that. So if you think you need a gig, you can get a gig, right? But then the question comes down to how do you pay for it, and how do you do it? So what I'm thinking of at this point is looking at this service as something that increases the value and enjoyment of property. I'll use those words specifically, and that we potentially look at setting this up as a special assessment where every single property within the city, with some exceptions, so if you have an MDU contract, clearly there's no benefit that we can have at this point, but that there's some method to assess properties on there so it becomes really part of your tax, which then I think puts us in a very competitive position with other providers, because you're going to pay for it regardless. Okay, you can certainly buy from another provider on top, but why buy something that you already get free? So I think that could potentially put us in a much better position, but we will have the providers pushing back on that. The other thing I think we need to be conscious of as we're going through this process is what Alachua County is planning on doing or not doing with broadband and the approach that they're going to take, which we're not sure. And this study looks solely within the boundaries of the city, but there is potential to go outside the city as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts with this, but I think, we're at a very good first step. I do think we need to, make some clear direction for the team as to what those priority areas would look like. For example, do we really need to have in the priority 1 area anything west of 13? Okay, if you ask me, no, and you redeploy those to basically the area that would be in the east. So the area that maybe is just west of Waldo in priority 2, and then maybe going down to, as far south as we can go east of Waldo without necessarily making the cost too high in the first priority. So
Yeah, I'm definitely very open to that. I think one thing we do need to keep as we're going east and south in the portions of the city there, I think there's a point where it gets very kind of rural in a sense of portions of it, and it could get very costly just to run to one home and stuff like that. So I think, but I do think that may be a good way to redeploy the funds. As for a special assessment, I think that's a very interesting way to do it. I think would result in probably the biggest savings we could ever offer to our residents. It would probably mean hundreds of dollars a year savings to each resident if we did it that way. If there's a special assessment of $50, $100 a year, when you do that to everyone, you probably could offer service to every single person for free. And those people right now are probably paying $700, $800, $900, $1,000 a year right now. So that could be a $800, $900 savings to residents, a net savings to them. So I think there's significant ability there. Commissioner Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to be careful with saying nothing west of 13th Street because there are definitely some pockets where there are a lot of people, relatively dense, both in the northwest and the southwest, that could use the help. That meet all the needs that we're talking about for east of Waldo Road. I agree too that we need to be careful with parts of that what's currently zone 2 that really aren't dense at all, where there are very few people living there. And I don't know if we need to, if we want to make that part of a first run. But really, I mean, the Phoenix area and the Pine Ridge area and the adjacent Northwood properties, which are, middle class / working class homes. I'd want to try to include those neighborhoods. I think there's value to that. Not only value, but a service value to that. I think there are people there who need that. So as far as for-profit providers pushing back, I agree they will push back. Honestly, I had hoped to get more movement from them prior to this. We've been talking about it again for years. And I'm not trying to throw anyone under the proverbial bus here, but I haven't seen anything. I don't see anything different. I continue to hear about the same plan that I was told about before 2017. And that plan is not helping people get great internet cheaper any more now than it was back then. So if they were going to make a proposal to work with the city on really honestly bridging the digital divide, they should have done it by now. If they've got something in their back pocket that they want to talk about, this committee's here a lot, and we're pretty easy to find. So that said, go ahead and push back. I am interested in from a legal perspective, where providers have brought suits against communities and won. I think the ones that I'm aware of, the community, as long as they're willing to fight to the finish, have won. I don't want to spend a bunch of money in court, but I do want people to be served. I want this affordable, robust, universal broadband. So I think it's something our community deserves. Thank you.
I think we're on the suits from other from the current service providers. I do think we're in a much better position than most other places because we've been doing it for 20 years. It's not like we're getting the system and we are a provider and we have been a provider. I do have one question for Magellan. What is the difference in price of being able to, I do see some municipal ISPs offering the 10 gig service. Is that a significant increase to be able to build? I mean, I assume that's just the components on either side of the fiber line, but what does that add to the cost of being able to offer that and kind of another kind of future proof or putting yourself ahead a few years?
Sure. So we will model it both ways for this project. 1 gig GPON services, that's the technology utilized to deploy fiber 1 gig services, is in no way, shape, or form end of life. But there are next generation solutions that are out there and available. And when you buy those electronics, that's a 10-year investment, up to 10-year investment, right? So if you deploy a 1 gig GPON service today, it's a long cycle, right? Before you have that next refresh. So we will price that out both ways. It is more expensive. It can be, I think we're doing a similar project in Waterloo, Iowa right now, about 30,000 passings, not quite as big as the city of Gainesville. But I want to say it's like a 7% premium, 8% premium on the electronics. The good news is that the fiber plant is no more expensive. In fact, you can even reduce some of the components in the fiber plant because you're able to split the fibers more between end users. So there are some efficiencies that can be gained in the outside plant engineering to deploy 10 gig.
Any more comments from the commission or from staff or the committee or staff? Feldman? Like open up to the public. Anybody here like to make any comments on the plan or discussion?
Mr. Chair, this is Lisa Bennett. Can I speak for a moment?
Sure.
I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm one of the assistant city attorneys, and Magellan Advisors. You could probably contact me through, I think it's Mr. Duda, who's the project manager. I'd like to have some discussions about the application of 350 of the statutes and also the special assessment idea. And let's work through that as you're working through the finances.
Awesome. We will reach out here in the coming weeks and then definitely engage you. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Anybody from the public like to make Mr. Eastman?
Hi there, commissioners. Brian Eastman. I'm the founder of Connected Gainesville, who was pushing for about 5 years ago, launched to make sure that there was robust, affordable, high-speed internet for everyone in our community. So it's been a long time coming to get to the point where we're happy to see great reports coming out like this that are really diving into the quantitative numbers, qualitative, just trying to look at all of the information. What we would like to see, as well as what Commissioner Ward said, was universality across all of the city of Gainesville and ideally out across Alachua County. Obviously, you need to have a financial system that's going to work, that's going to allow us to be financially solvent and then continue to move out from there. So I'd be curious to dive into more of these priority areas. Obviously, you're as the city manager spoke about, Waldo Road, you have a lot of low-income areas that are right there that are in priority area 2. I guess I'd have to dive a little bit deeper into the report as to why that would be, but as a whole, it looks like a very good group. I'd be curious as to why it is as contiguous as it is. As Commissioner Ward pointed out, there are areas that are in high need that are on the west side. They tend to be kind of in smaller clusters, but are important for equity and making sure those areas are connected. And priority area 1 seems to be one contiguous area, but we know fiber is scattered across the area. There's over 600 miles of fiber internet through GrooveCom. But as a whole, I think this looks good. There's no, except looking more and trying to push this more to the southeast, there's no real feedback that I have on this. This has been a great report. I've been really happy to see everything that you guys have put into it. Happy to see, just all the quantitative information. This is the stuff that we've been hoping for years. So it's all very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in chambers? No? All right. Want to read out the number for online?
If any members of the public would like to call in to share a comment, you may dial the following number. It's 301-715-8592. And the meeting ID to enter is 839-4424-3122. And these numbers are also available on the city's website.
While we're waiting for people to call in, I did want to kind of the contiguous question about priority areas. Is there a design reason for that, or just kind of it's easier to do just a contiguous, or there's a cost if it starts to pop around all over the place?
There's not. We looked at, as I mentioned, 4 or 5 different data sources. We tried to create a methodology that weighted some of those in different ways. We also took a look at the new NTIA maps that came out that showed things like speed tests and average speed results. So this is an analysis performed by our design team. And it's one that we do regularly, right, as we look for areas of need and gaps within communities. There is some discontiguous or uncontiguous segments. You can see here kind of up in the Paradise area, there's a couple gray census blocks up in here. Same thing down here in phase 3. There's a large phase 5 segment. So this is our first pass at the data and, kind of what the data tells us. We are entirely open into, redrawing these lines and these boundaries. And, to answer your more direct question, they do not have to be contiguous.
Okay. And one question just on does priority 1, does that meet kind of the ARP? Even kind of looking at that, I'm sure, does that meet the funding that we could use for priority area 1?
So we were trying to identify those areas that appeared to not meet those requirements of 25 by 3, which is why we dug so hard into the data. We also looked at some other data sets, right? Things like low moderate income, which is what HUD and CDBG uses, as well as some other metrics around educational attainment and poverty levels. But yes, we do believe that the priority area 1 meets the definition, or really not the definition, but more of the guidance, if you will, through ARP. And that's really why we kind of took this approach, right? Was to find those areas that would most easily qualify, right, to be used under the ARP guidelines.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, anybody? Okay, no one is there. I do have one question just on so we have I guess the next steps would be coming back with kind of what the operating costs would be for these areas. We have the capital costs, but.
Yep. So let me, if I could, I have one final slide to kind of wrap this up. We will touch base with Mr. Feldman and Dave Duda next week. And if there's any, again, red lines drawn, new maps you want to produce, give us whatever feedback you can and we'll get to work. As far as the next steps for us, we do have some additional stakeholder outreach that we're going to be conducting over the next couple of weeks. For instance, we have a meeting with the Realtor Board here in the coming weeks. We're also trying to meet. Dave, what is the MDU group named?
I think it's North Central Florida Apartment Association.
That's
Yeah. So we have a number of additional stakeholders we're reaching out to. So we'll be wrapping that. Obviously, the phasing and the priority areas, as we just discussed. Dave will be reaching out to Lewis and the rest of the group GRU team to get the additional financial data that we need to get our hands on. Lewis, there's also some questions just around other network details, other assets, data centers, core networking that we need to dig into a little bit. And then, as far as our next task here, we're going to be moving forward into the business planning process. So, we're going to talk a bit about business models and evaluate some options. We're definitely going to be addressing the organizational structure as well as the operating requirements for any lines of business that you may engage in. Obviously, GRUCOM is engaged in business today, but going residential could be a departure from what they've been doing for a while. So there's new operating requirements around that. We'll look at the network architecture, the design, the operations and maintenance, develop 20-year forecasts and a full financial model, and then provide all of the supporting documentation, mapping, preliminary cost estimates to the city. So this is our work plan for really the next 3 months. And we hope to be back here in the fall to provide some guidance.
All right. Thank you very much. And just one thing the manager spoke about the county with their funds. I did speak with Chair Cornell, and I do think there are opportunities for us to work together. I do think that we are, because of our exemptions that are already in place with us being able to provide service, no other kind of municipality in the area can do that right now. So we do have to look at how we can partner on that. And I do think I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but looking at the free service for everyone and then having the add-ons you can get, I think would be game changing and really would, like, that hits the digital divide straight on the head and makes us a destination. Commissioner Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I am interested in how we might offer the service to the existing GRU service area. And probably that comes at a different cost and to act as an incentive to come into the city of Gainesville. That's just blatantly, that's a thing. It's a mistake I believe we made a long time ago in offering city utility services to people who had no intention of coming into developments, who had no intention of coming into the city of Gainesville. It's something the city of Tallahassee did right. It's something we made a mistake on, and I don't want us to make that mistake with this. Doesn't mean we shouldn't offer services. Does mean they should not be at the same level. I think, particularly price-wise. As far as municipalities outside the city of Gainesville and Alachua County, we already run the fiber to those communities, other than Micanopy in the county. I mean, offering the last mile service to those folks, I think makes sense because it adds customers to the customer base, and we could negotiate with the municipalities for how they would like to handle that. There is value thinking about it just as a Gainesville service. There's also value to how we might do it otherwise. Now, that said, it's really hard to offer broadband service to folks who have chosen to live on some land out in the county that isn't connected to anybody else. It's not part of a neighborhood. That's challenging, and I don't want it to cost more for us to run fiber to the home in the city of Gainesville because we're trying to serve somebody who has made a choice to not be in a neighborhood somewhere in the county. If the county wants to underwrite that and subsidize it, that's fine. Or the school board wants to, fine. I have no problem. I don't want to tell them what they should do. But we have to draw a line and say, this is an urban service, I think.
Yeah, if I could just respond.
Thanks.
Yep, Commissioner, if I could just respond to that, we will definitely, we, as Mr. Feldman mentioned, the city of Gainesville is the focus here, and we will go ahead and develop a base case for, the funding requirements, the operating requirements for the base case, for the city limits. We will look at the additional data in both the service territory and even the county. And, we can help the city easily understand what that opportunity looks like. Once you have the base case created, right, all those additional areas kind of become incremental to the business plan. So we'll discuss that with Mr. Feldman on our next call, and we'll put together a plan to address that.
So I would also point out that there is benefit, I don't want to say kind of a political benefit, sort of a bargaining benefit to having the other municipalities in the county come along with us on this. They're very interested. There's no question. I've talked to commissioners in other cities, the smaller cities. They're very interested in finding some way to bring internet to their communities. And if there's a way for us to do that, that helps us leverage. Otherwise, I think that we should be interested in that. Thank you.
All right. Any other guidance from the Union of Magellan or from staff at this point? All right. Well, I really do appreciate the report that you put back. I think it's well thought out and kind of lines very well with the kind of the vision of the city and with what we're trying to achieve. And I also think it shows that running fiber to the home is feasible and something that that we should continue to look at and move forward on. All right, we will close that item and we'll move to public comment. Anybody like to talk about anything not on the agenda? Seeing none, move to member comment. Anything? All right, our next meeting date is September 13th. And again, I want to thank all of staff, David Duda, Mr. Mann, and the manager as well, and everyone at Magellan for your help in working on this and helping to guide us through. We are adjourned.